So, good morning, everybody. I'm Marie Jenkins from Advance Your Wellbeing, and welcome to our second season of the Secret Diary of Marie Jenkins 47 Plus. Now, today is going to be a real bonus episode for our Wellbeing Week because we've got a new guest with us this morning, and it's Dave Rogers. How are you, Dave?
How are you doing, Marie? Thank you very much for letting me join the podcast today.
Oh, it's an absolute delight. And I've read your book, Fueled, Fit and Fired Up. So hopefully, while we're having our in conversation we'll be able to pick up a bit more about your book, what you do. But I'll just give a brief introduction. And I say brief, but it's the biggest introduction I've ever done because you've got so many skills and you're involved in so many things. So David is a strategic business leader with over 25 years working in numerous industries. You're currently the head of finance at Marsden's PLC in Wolverhampton, and you've spent 15 years in the hospitality sector, which I've also come from a hospitality background, Dave, so it's great to hear that people are still passionate about that type of industry.
Exactly.
And you've also very people focused, and you've got a particular passion for well-being and personal development. So we'll talk a bit more about that. But outside of work, you're a coach, you're a mentor, you advise schools and their students on career development, and I think you're an enterprise advisor with
That's right. Yeah, so I'm the lead enterprise advisor with the Black Country Careers Hub. So yeah, one of 100 strong network of business people helping schools and local colleges.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic because I'm an enterprise advisor, as you know, based
Yeah,
in Worcestershire. So it's lovely to connect with other enterprise advisors outside of my region, if you like. So it's great to see that that is really going well. But as well as that, you're a non-exec director position at GMS Group, which is a security specialist. Another passion of mine around mental health, you're involved with the Kaleidoscope Plus Group, which is a
correct.
national charity, I believe, for
That's
mental
right.
health
Yes.
and well-being. And you're also involved in Warren's Hall Riding School, which is equestrian lessons and therapy, which I find fascinating how these are all very different. But ultimately, people skills are at the heart of all of those. You're the author, as I've already mentioned, of Fueled, Fit and Fired Up, which focus on individuals' health and well-being. And you share practical techniques and you focus on how you fuel your body to help your sleep, your breathing, your mindset, and how these can all impact your physical and mental fitness. Now, it was released May 2021, am I right?
That's right. Yes. So it was the first anniversary of publication last Thursday, I think it was.
Yeah, so that when this episode goes out, it will be going out in the summer. So to coincide with your book launch in May 2021, I believe in May this year, you launched your own business.
Yes, so it wraps up all of the things you've already mentioned, really, around the non-exec directorship and supporting, whether it be sole trader, small businesses, businesses looking to grow, established businesses, help them create and develop financially healthy, commercially sustainable, and ultimately successful businesses. So it's really just building on all of the things you've already mentioned that I get involved in over the course of a week.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I wish you really all the best with your startup. And I know you're doing that alongside your current role at Marsden's at the
Correct.
moment, but hopefully, when that all takes off and success comes your way, you'll be able to focus on that more as a primary focus for you. So, but I know you've already got your website up and running, which we'll share the
That's
links
right.
to, etc. So, phew! Now that's an introduction, Dave. That is an introduction. So we'll
Yeah,
move on. Go on.
I was just gonna say, sorry, that yeah, it's not until somebody does an introduction like that I realise how many things I'm actually involved in, Marie. So, yeah, perhaps I need to take an inward look at myself and work out whether that's yeah, burning myself out. You know, given the title of your book as well. So, yeah.
Well, it seems that you're doing a lot of the right things to me. But let's move on to today's
Yeah.
episode then. So, the first thing that I ask previous guests around well-being is, to you, what do you believe to be the new thing in the world of health and well-being from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question, that is, and I think there's for me there's two things currently, and both ultimately lead to the same thing. And I think it's easy to initially focus on the latest sort of health regimes or that sort of stuff, but for me it's around sort of people's stress and anxiety, particularly around, I think, financial well-being is starting to become a thing a little bit more. I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of pressure on people's finances with all of the cost inflation that we've seen, whether it be fuel, whether it be utilities, whether it be the cost of food and drinks in whether it be pubs in the trade army or whether it be just in the supermarket and stuff like that. And those sort of things I think are obviously developing, people will start developing a little bit more anxiety and worry and stress about, how are they going to, in the nicest possible way, afford to live. And
yeah,
I think that coupled with perhaps a little bit more focus nowadays, well, not a little bit more, there's a lot more focus nowadays on the impact that we're having on the environment as well, and the long term sort of environmental impacts. And I think I read yesterday that Google have seen triple digit percentage increases in the number of searches for environmental uh, anxiety, climate change, and all those sort of things. And I think those two things are ultimately feeding into the sort of the mental, emotional, physical well-being
yeah.
space. And how do we then, as a, well, not just a country, but as the world, try and create the support network that's needed around those things.
I totally agree with you. I mean, the cost of living crisis, it's on the news on a daily basis at the moment. Excuse me. So, yeah, I can totally understand. And obviously, with your finance head on,
Yeah,
then, you understand that more than a lot of people. But yeah, they do cause anxieties. And in terms of the environment, I mean, again, it's one of those areas that people really sort of focus on how they can make positive interventions for their environment and,
mm,
the whole green agenda and all of that type of thing. So I can
yeah,
totally understand. But yeah, you've made some really valid points there, Dave. You really have. But
yeah. And I
what
think,
what do
like,
you think? Go on, sorry.
sorry, yeah, sorry. What I was just going to add was, if you think about, we're both a similar age, and if you think back when we were younger, and there was the whole, ozone layer, sort of debate about, I can't remember, was it CFCs in aerosols and stuff like that, and
Yeah,
actually, we sort of, there was a little bit of like, oh yeah, really, is that really gonna have an impact? And I'm not saying that has had a direct impact to what we're seeing now, but there is a genuine, there is something happening within the climate that we're all aware of. We're seeing,
yeah,
you know um, much more, flooding in parts of, Worcestershire, or some of the natural disasters there's been across the world. I
yeah.
read an article in preparation for today's recording. I read an article yesterday about, is Australia becoming un, uninhabitable, in the sense that they're having, like, wildfires, flash floods, and there's clearly something happening, and that's got to be impacting people's, thoughts, and particularly young people's thoughts about, who've got their whole
Yeah.
life ahead of them, to consider all of these things, and both the financial point and the climate point are linked very closely with the younger generation.
I totally agree. And the whole I was listening actually to a podcast today, which I know who you know, Dan Barker, who's one of our
Yes.
other guests on our podcast, and he was interviewing a lady called Katie Alcott, who has her own water business called Frank Water. And what she's done, because plastic pollution is a massive thing and we can all do our little bit. But she's going to festivals and they're doing refillables, because what she found was at the end of the festivals, there was plastic everywhere,
Yeah.
and we can all do our little bit. So by them going to festivals and having refillable stations, little things like that, we can all do our little bit that can help environment. So yeah, it was a great listen actually, and I was really
Yeah.
humbled by her passion to make a difference and to make a change. But yeah, it's
Mm.
climate and finance are sort of high up there on the stress levels, I can imagine, for a
That's it.
lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on then to our other topic that I want to ask you about is, now we all know we've got an aging population, which is great because it shows that we're investing in our health and well-being and we're living longer. But how can we continue to live well in an aging population, would you say?
Again, a really, really great question. And I'm actually reading a book at the moment called Ageless by Andrew Steele. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but
All right.
it's about the new science of getting older without getting old. And
Okay.
yeah, so it talks about, so your point about, the average age of the population has been increasing. But actually, when you look back in history, it talks about actually, the challenge, the average age of the population wasn't actually driven by necessarily by people um, dying at an earlier age. It was actually driven by young people not getting through key stages of their lives. So actually, when you look at the older end of our population now, it's not too dissimilar to what it was back 150 years ago, maybe 200 years
Yeah.
ago. So it's really interesting how he then links that to, obviously, we've learned to live well, to your point. People are more focused on their well-being now, whether it be what they're eating, drinking, how they're sleeping, getting fit, all of those sort of, or how we're accessing, our mind and using that as a way to improve our health. But he talks about how uh, the if you link it to the animal population and how you have animals such as elephants, whales, giant tortoises that live disproportionately longer than the human race does.
Yeah.
It's quite interestingly linked to a number of things. One of which is the speed of life. So actually, we know that we're bombarded by all sorts of different stimuli during the day, whether it be
Yeah.
TV, radio, reading, stress level, bills coming through the door, whatever that might be. And actually, we feel like we're moving at 100 miles an hour. So
Yeah.
actually, in order to live well within an aging population, we almost need to slow down a little bit, and
Absolutely.
and take it and um, use our lifestyle better. And I think that's one of the things that's come out of one of the real positives that's come out of the pandemic has been this people taking a step back and looking at their overall lifestyle and their working pattern, and how they can get the benefit of both a fantastic home life and a fantastic business life, and get that balance
Yeah.
between the two. And I think that's the key really for me, is living in this sort of, as you described it, sort of an aging population, is how do you get all of those things in balance. But then again, as you quite rightly said, putting my finance hat back on for a moment, there's an element of going, but in the nicest possible way, we need to fund ourselves getting old as well.
Yeah.
And going back again to your first question, is, as well as that sort of stuff impacting the younger generation, it's also impacting the older demographics of the world, or particularly in the UK, because they're on fixed incomes through pensions and things like that. But actually, the cost of inflation currently is far outweighing that. Any increase has been in state pension probably for the last however many years.
Yeah.
So actually, there's a bit of, like I said, how do we help support the older generations, from a well-being perspective, because they're going to be under increased stress, anxiety, perhaps eating unhealthily because they have to buy, cheaper foods in order to live, basically, which is a horrible thing to say, but I think that's the reality of the situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And when it comes to finances, as you picked up there, being one of the main factors around well-being, if we can do what we can to educate our younger people when they grow older, then they're going to be better prepared to sort of go into their more mature years with a better basis on their finances. And that really takes me nicely on to my other thing that I wanted to ask you about, Dave, was, have we got it right in terms of well-being for our society now? Are the young people getting that help? I mean, there's like Go Henry that I see advertised on the telly, which is a card app which helps children budget. I mean, that's a fantastic initiative in my view. But what do you think in terms of, have we got those basics right?
Yeah, again, a really interesting question, and I could probably talk for not just the 30 minutes of this podcast episode, but hours about this. And I think it fits nicely into the fact, we're both part of the Enterprise Advisor Network, so we probably get to see and meet young people, on a relatively regular basis as part of that, and as well as talking to them about sort of careers development and showing them opportunities that they may have to, or we might be able to inspire them to aspire to be the best they can be in terms of a career or job opportunities.
Yeah.
I think that's the bit where I'm seeing more and more sort of talks around resilience, financial management, Metro Bank, that people might know. They do a lot of fantastic stuff around sort of primary school age, actually. Teaching school children and students at that age group about finances in a fun and exciting way to get them thinking about that. Because I think, if I look back to when I was 12, 13, 14, and even going through to my A levels, probably, sort of at no point did anybody go, do you know what, Dave, you really need to think about like how you're managing your finances and talk about pension schemes and talk, and it wasn't really till I went to university that you go, oh, actually, I've got, back when I was at university, it was effectively free. I didn't even have the challenge of student debt and student loans that students coming out of university have now. But even then, you were sort of going, oh, okay, right, I can go to the bank of mum and dad if I'm really desperate. But that was the first time I was really forced to think about how you manage finances. And in some respects, that's too late. To your point, it's how do we speak to the young people on a national level around all of the things that we've just spoken about is impacting people's well-being now, to try and almost bring it being a preventative discussion,
proactive,
and being proactive about it, rather than it being something that we're reacting to and finding a way of getting, for want of a better phrase, making people better. Because it's gone too far at that point. It's about trying to think about what things can we put in place. And don't get me wrong, this is not easy. I genuinely feel for anybody who works in the education sector, the teachers, the support staff, because they've got such a tight curriculum to deliver. Absolutely. That sometimes it's very difficult to shoehorn anything into that. You know, we in some instances we struggle just with the career stuff that you and I are involved in, but then to add a separate level of well-being on top of that, I think, you know, is very difficult, I think.
I see it as an opportunity myself, David, because
Mm,
I think, you know, I totally agree. Teachers are doing an incredible job at the moment, you know, with all of the changes that
mm,
they've been through. But I think it's an opportunity for them to be more creative with their lesson planning.
mm.
And I'm looking to launch my second book actually
Yeah,
soon, which is called The Secret Emoji Diary of a Teenager. And it's basically to try and help children prepare for adulthood, for a
yeah,
lot of the things you've just said. And one of the books I've read by a gentleman called Dr. Adrian Burden, he
right.
wrote a business book which is called Start to Exit. And his methodology is that you start with the end in mind of your business, and then you know, and how you're going to exit your business, where you want your business to get to, and then you start your business. And when I think about that methodology, that's something we could adopt in our own lives. So if we want
Yeah,
to think about, if, and that's something that I've incorporated in my book actually, is to think about what sort of career you want to have, what sort of lifestyle you want to have, what sort of pension, and all these
mm,
things. Start with the end in mind first, so that you know where you've got to work towards.
yeah,
And yeah, it's fascinating. But let's touch on your book
yeah.
for a few minutes, because I've read it. I thought it was the most enlightening self-help book I've read, obviously, other than my own Burnout to Wealth. I would say that. But yeah, talk me through your book. What can people get from it?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's for me, it was about sharing uh, things and technique tips that I've applied, tried, learned over the last probably 2 and a bit years, 3 years, about my own health and well-being. And I wanted to write. I described it to somebody earlier in the week as it's a normal book for normal people,
I like that.
in the sense that it's about real life and providing things that we can all do differently without it being, you know, the whole, you know, Instagrammable fitness journey and lifestyle that, you know, that people share. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But this is, for me, was about people like me who have got busy lives, as you described in the fantastic
Yeah.
introduction, but things that we can just do on a day-to-day basis. And it started off as it was all about sort of what you consume and keeping fit. And then as I started writing the book, I started learning a lot more about healthy sleeping patterns, you know, how breathing can help you, whether it be, you know, getting more energy, whether it be sleeping, helping you sleep better, whether it be just in, you know, just health in general, you know, and learning about habit building and all of those sort of things that perhaps sometimes people just don't know, like, sort of where to start, and we tend to
Yeah.
throw ourselves into it at 100 miles an hour in January when we set our New Year's resolutions, and we go,
Yeah.
right, what's the latest health fad? What's the latest fitness fad? I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this 24/7, you
Yeah.
know, non-stop. And then guess what? By the middle of February, everybody's going, I'm bored of this, because you've stripped out all of the fun
Yeah.
and
That's true.
you know, and all of the stuff that actually, you know, you enjoy. So in the book I write about a technique called Beat the Week, which is about basically having more good days than bad days during the
Yeah.
week. And that for me is about, you know, there's 21 meal times in a week. So actually one bad meal, even 5 bad meals, isn't going to cause you a problem as long as the others are all healthy or healthier than you
Absolutely. Yeah.
would eat normally. And that sort of, I suppose it's very similar to the marginal gains concept that Sky and British Cycling and lots of other businesses have used to great successes. It's that small changes just add up and compound to some really big results, and that applies whether it's in business, in well-being, sport, doesn't matter. The concept works for everybody in any type of environment.
I totally agree. And I remember sort of when I was reading your book about you was doing diaries of your food and what you was eating and things. And I think
Yeah,
you've got to make it sustainable. So, you know, I'm very aware of my diet, but I've got a balance, I think, because I do a lot of cycling, and I know you do a lot of walking. But it's making it realistic and
yeah,
something that you're going to be able to continue. So yes,
yeah,
making New Year's resolutions is good,
yeah,
you know, but it's been long term putting it in your diary. I mean, yesterday, I mean, when this goes out, it would have been in, where are we, May. You gave a talk at All for One Networking with Alison Cotton. And what resonated with me was you were saying about writing a list. And then Ali Bagley said, well, actually, it's including things on that list that you need to do that are part of your everyday life. So whether you were saying about going shopping.
yeah,
And you know, you've got a finite amount of time in your week, so you have to consider these things and adding them onto the list. So the one thing I took from your talk, Dave, was making sure that I manage my time and manage myself better. So
yeah.
thank you very much for that. But it's been an absolute pleasure. We could go on, and hopefully we'll have you back in a future episode, because I'd like to hear how your new business venture's going to go.
No, fantastic. Really enjoyed today, and yet be more than happy to come back as a guest on a future podcast.
Hopefully so, David. All the best of luck with your business. If people want to get a copy of David's book, you can go on to Amazon, Fueled, Fit, Fired Up. He's also got his own website, so I'll put all of the contact details in the show notes. But it's been lovely to catch up with you, David. Thank you so much for coming on.
Cheers. Bye now.
Thanks, Dave.